What's up, everybody? Noah Hiles, Chris Carter here from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Pitt loses another one. It's third straight, falls to North Carolina, the number 17 team in the country, by a final score of 42-24 here at Acrisure Stadium. Carter, third straight week we're doing this. We've got the good, the bad, and the ugly, and for the third straight week, there's a lot more bad and ugly than there was good. However, of all the good things, most of them actually came pretty early on, which is a rarity with this team, especially this season. You can start us off. What was your good?
It was the fast start on offense, Noah. I mean, you look at this game, two opening drive touchdowns. That has not happened yet all season. Yeah. And I'll say two things. One, the offensive line dominated the line of scrimmage. Blake Zavovic talked about that before the game. It's like we emphasized that starting fast, starting hot. And this is the fourth time they've had a new offensive line. They had a whole new group out there, a new center in Terrence Moore. I thought they handled their jobs well for a first time being out there against a team like North Carolina that's ranked. Also, Phil Dracovic handling what was out there very well. I think Frank Signetti Jr. called a very good first half. He gave him easy opportunities to kind of get into a rhythm. And even though Phil wasn't elite or anything like that, he was 11 for 15 for 159 yards and led those two touchdown drives. That's the offensive start that you want for Pitt to give your defense a chance to protect the lead. The problem was they didn't.
Yes, and my good real quick here, and you kind of hit on it. You praised a lot of the players executing. I thought they had a great game plan in the opening, I think, quarter and a half maybe. I think they got away from that game plan later on, but I mean early, if you look, you had two guys making their first career start at the collegiate level on offense. So how do you prepare with that? You run behind the guys who are experienced, and then when you pass, you got it out quick. That not only helps your offensive line, that helps your quarterback who is struggling. He completed his first 7 pass attempts. This is a guy who only had 8 completions in 4 quarters of play last weekend. So I think that's great play calling. And they also got the guys involved who needed to be involved. Kanate Mumfield, heavy involvement early. His first 3 catches of the game were all catches on third down. Each of them moved the chains. Gavin Bartholomew, 2 big catches in the first half for 59 yards. We'll talk more about what he did or lack thereof later in this show, I'm sure. And Rodney Hammond Jr., 7 carries again on the opening possession. That results in a touchdown scored by him from 7 yards out. He was more heavily involved today. I think they got away from him a little later on because of the score, not because of scheme. But overall, I liked what we saw there early on. You got to get the ball into the hands of your best players if you're Pitt, because there aren't a lot of playmakers right now. It doesn't look like that. So you got to get other people involved. But we'll get into the bad now, and it's Phil Dracovic's injury. We learned today that it looks like Phil Dracovic's the best quarterback on this team. And we're going to talk about the other guy behind him later in this show. But this game really, really changed when Dracovic went down. And while Pitt was trailing at that point in time, there was at least some sort of vibe that Pitt kind of had a chance to remain competitive in this game because they were moving the ball. They did go 3 and out twice with him in the first half, but they were moving the football, and you had a sense that as long as he was around, they were at least going to be able to put up some sort of points. And the offense didn't really score without him. So that injury's bad. You don't really know what the goal for this Pitt team is this season anymore, Carter. At 1-3, is it reaching a bowl? Is it getting ready for next year at this point? I mean, Coach Narduzzi will certainly say it's to compete this year, but let's be real. What is best for Pitt right now? And if it is to continue to try to compete this year, I think number 5 is actually probably the guy you want under center after what we saw today. And that injury, being that it's not a concussion, they said he's not in concussion protocol. We don't know anything else about it. But if it's not a concussion, that means it's probably going to be something. I think the odds of it being longer than a week are higher than if it was just a concussion. So not looking good on that front. That's my bad. What's your bad, Carter?
My bad was just the coverage that was against Drake May. Now, I want to preface this with this. Drake May is a great college quarterback. He showed that why he is a Heisman candidate, why he's a prospect looking to be a high first-round draft pick when he's ready to go to the NFL draft. But Pitt's attempts to try to fool him in coverage didn't even impact him. He didn't even blink at what they were doing. And I saw what Pitt normally does. They normally run quarters, they run man, and they leave their guys on islands, and they still kind of did that. They just tried to switch up how they were doing it. Guys would line up and press against the slot and then drop and get the guy that was lining up on the outside, like the flanker, while a deeper coverage safety would come up and get the guy in the slot. Just trying to confuse May on where his hot reads would be, and he didn't even blink. And I think that's the thing about Drake May, is that guy, he's fiery. He's not afraid of contact. You saw there was one hit that Deion Hayes hit him pretty hard. He kind of took a play off or two. When he came back, he was barking at Pitt players. He was talking his trash, and then he came out and showed out. He had a passing touchdown that he threw with his left hand. That was ridiculous. And then on top of that, he had 2 rushing touchdowns, one on a sneak and one on just a designed run where he rolled out his running back, turned into his lead blocker, and he walked into the end zone. But Drake May makes you consider all the things. He was hitting passes down the sideline even when Pitt's cornerbacks were in good coverage. And again, this isn't to say that they were terrible this game. They just got outplayed by a great quarterback.
And let's get into the ugly now, Carter. I'll let you start.
The ugly is the fact that they have a 1-3 record right now. And listen, today, I think even if they had come into the day 3-0, I think that they still would have had the problems, because when Drake May plays like this, it is very tough to beat him. But if they had handled their business against teams that were very beatable like Cincinnati and West Virginia, they'd be 3-1 right now, and this loss would be more like humbling. They've learned their lesson. They could take this forward in the rest of ACC play. But now they're in a position where Pat Narduzzi talked about after the game. He was like, hey, there's going to be the 2 teams that are competing for the ACC championship are both going to have 1 loss. So him kind of like leaving the door open there for they only have 1 ACC loss, so that could count for them. But Noah, this team now needs to go crazy in its ACC schedule, whereas before, to have a formidable season, they might have been able to afford to lose to Florida State. But now it's like they're going to have to win a lot more of the games that on paper they shouldn't win, and that's the difficult point. What's your ugly?
To build upon that, you don't know what your offense is going to look like. Your best option at quarterback right now, has had 6 good quarters of football this season, and we don't know how healthy this guy is. We don't know if he'll be available next week. And I say this because Christian Veilleux came in, and this is a guy that Pitt fans have been begging for 2 weeks now. And in 2 quarters, he put together a stat line that was nearly identical to what Djokovic put forth last weekend in Morgantown. And I get it. Djokovic did that in 4 quarters. It was a whole game's worth of work. Veilleux came in backup duty against a better team. But nonetheless, he was 8 of 19. He had 80-something yards passing, 2 interceptions and a fumble. So that's almost identical completion percentage, 3 turnovers. And this is the guy everyone wanted. And now I think we found out why Djokovic wasn't pulled. It's because there might not be a better option behind him. And if that's the case, then this team's in real trouble. Pat's talking in the postgame about how this team's going to try to find a way to compete to get to the ACC championship game. Carter, this team needs to figure out a way to win a football game. Yeah. There are some people who I still think are looking at the schedule. Oh, Virginia Tech lost to Marshall this week. That should be an easy win to get them in the win column. Nothing's going to be easy for this team. The opponents that this team has lost to are not good football teams. West Virginia, I guess, is a lot better than what people thought it was. But, Cincinnati's out here losing to MAC schools. There is no guaranteed wins, especially if it has a guy who couldn't beat Phil Djokovic out for a starting spot running the offense next week in Blacksburg, loud atmosphere, and that team's just as desperate for a victory as Pitt. So Veilleux's play was very ugly, and I'm not writing this guy off by any means. I still think he'll probably be the starter for Pitt next season, but this was not a good first introduction to the quote-unquote quarterback of the future. So that's my ugly. Big thanks to Mike's Beer Bar for sponsoring this post-game show, as they do every week. Carter, Pitt's 1-3. Any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
Just that if Pitt's gonna bounce back, it has to be this next week. This will be this was a game where I was wondering how would they come out with their backs against the wall. Now their backs are literally in the corner of the ring. Virginia Tech is one of your most beatable opponents, probably left on the schedule. You have to get a win against this team. If you do not, you set yourself up for what could be Pat Narduzzi's first losing season since 2017, which would be his second of his 9-year career here at Pitt. That would be rough.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two routes here. If you're Pitt, you can have a 2019 season where you finish with 7 wins in the regular season, somewhere around there. You go to a not that great bowl game, but you can win. Say, hey, we got an 8-win season. That's probably the ceiling. And the floor is, like you said, 2017. And I don't know if they got a Kenny Pickett to throw in there in week 12 to get that win.